I feel very fortunate to be able to serve as the director for the Clinic of Autism Research, Evaluation, and Support, which is right here in what I believe to be the very best college of education in the world at Texas State University. In CARES, CARES offers the variety of services, the usual suspects, right? We do assessment, special education support, language and behavioral interventions, that sort of thing. We work very hard to ensure that we have a very specific type of reputation in our field and in the community of people we serve. We want to be known as a clinic that is dedicated to evidence-based practice. Now, evidence-based practice is one of those terms that's been defined by many agencies and organizations, but there are some common threads, and I want to focus on this one. Evidence-based practice requires an empirical demonstration of benefit in multiple, well-designed, peer-reviewed studies done by different groups of researchers. So what we're saying here is that experiments need to be careful enough that the results are unlikely to be misinterpreted, and that researchers other than the ones who do the initial creation or development of a product or a curriculum or something must be able to replicate the effects of those who do involve themselves in those creations. Whatever sort of certainty can be approached in science requires that kind of replication. Now, we could spend an entire semester talking about the qualities of a good research design, or how many studies does it take, how much science before a practice should be considered an evidence-based practice. And if you want to have those conversations, we're accepting graduate school applications. I'd love to talk to you. But that is not the particular rabbit hole I want to go down with you today. Today, I want to talk about evidence-based practices' arch nemesis, pseudoscience. Pseudo is Latin for false, so I mean a false science. Unfortunately, there is a tremendous amount of false science or pseudoscience in the fields related to the education and treatment of autism. Let me show you what I mean. Now, well, first of all, I realize this is probably the worst slide ever shown in a TED Talk, right? Because it violates all the laws the TED Talk people gave me. It needs to be readable at a glance. It's way too cluttered. I get it, I do, but it underscores an important point about the number of interventions and curriculums and supplements and medications and medical procedures all out there in the environment claiming to benefit people with autism in some way. Now, Vanessa Green and her colleagues surveyed 552 parents of children with autism worldwide, and among other things, asked them to identify the interventions or services that their children were receiving now or in the past. And this list was constituted from those answers. On this list, there are many powerful, rigorously demonstrated evidence-based practices that are likely to bring benefit to the people who use them. But, somewhat alarmingly, also on this list are a number of interventions that literally have zero scientific support in the peer-reviewed literature. That is to say, no one other than the people disseminating the product or the curriculum has investigated the claims. Right? So this dissemination before demonstration, disseminating to the public before demonstrating in the scientific literature, is a hallmark characteristic of pseudoscience. But it's not the scariest thing on this slide. The scariest thing on this slide is the group of interventions that have been rigorously studied, and that groups of researchers have replicated the same effects to show that the intervention is ineffective, and in some cases, horrendously dangerous. Now, in this context, CARES tries to provide evidence-based practice. So we became curious. Why is it that people intellectually and emotionally devoted to the outcomes of students and children with autism sometimes select dangerous, ineffective, pseudoscientific interventions over effective evidence-based practice options? In other words, how do pseudoscientific critters survive despite being ineffective? So we devoted a bit of our research agenda to identifying evidence-based practices and identifying some pseudoscientific practices, but perhaps most importantly, on trying to describe some shared characteristics across practices. In terms of the pseudoscientific group, perhaps the most important of the shared characteristics is the way in which it is marketed to the consumer, to the public. Let me show you what I mean. Remember this guy, right? He's kind of iconic. He'd pull up into town in his covered wagon or whatever and park on Main Street, and people wearing dusty overalls or something would saunter up. And he would proudly proclaim, "Snake oil's a miracle of modern medicine." And, some people think they're being informed consumers when they simply flip a bottle over to check the label, right? I guess forgetting that the label was put on the bottle by the same people trying to sell the bottle. But nonetheless, we'll do at least that. Wow, this stuff is amazing. It cures instantly measles, mumps, neuralgia, and gonorrhea, among other maladies. Of course, if you want to treat your visual impairment, you are going to go ahead and need to upgrade to the rattlesnake oil, but that just makes sense, right? No, of course it doesn't make sense. Everybody watching immediately thought to themselves, "Oh, that's pseudoscience. I see it. I see it right there." Right? I want you to come with me on something for just a second. I want you to pretend that this pseudoscience is like a little critter. Right? Those of you not from Texas, a little critter is like a little varmint or a rodent or something, and it's kind of like covertly in your environment doing damage, so I think it's a fair enough analogy. This little critter is surviving in this environment, right? You see it readily as pseudoscience, but if you were gathered around that wagon back in the day, this would have seemed so much more compelling. Why? Because of the mystery. Today, we know so much more about the underlying biological and physiological processes resulting that pertain to disease, injury, health, wellness, recovery. But back then, this was a list of scary, mysterious, incurable maladies. And where there is scientific mystery, there is room for magical thinking. But surely, we would never fall for such simple snake oil today, right? This is a bottle of MMS. It stands for, and I kid you not, Miracle Mineral Solution. Now, Miracle Mineral Solution has been marketed as a cure for autism online since the early 2000s. But that's not all. It's supposed to address issues related to cancer, HIV, AIDS, hepatitis, and the flu, among other mysterious, incurable maladies. This is the same environment our pseudoscientific critter was living in before, and it has adapted and is alive and well here. The FDA took a look. Turns out what's in MMS is a chemical, chlorine dioxide. That's industrial bleach. The American Association of Poison Control in 2019 reported 16,521 cases of poisoning from MMS. 2,500 of those cases were children under the age of 12 forced to drink bleach by their parents, 8 of whom died. We shouldn't be too surprised that this snake oil has found very recently an even newer environment ready to exploit because of the fear, debate, and scientific mystery. It's currently being marketed online as a preventative or cure for the coronavirus. Now, it's not surprising that pseudoscience is thriving where there are few evidence-based practice options, but what about when there has been enough reputable science outlining the parameters of evidence-based? Surely the pseudoscientific critter will struggle in such an environment, right? I'll give you a second to take this in because there's a lot going on here. Let's start with this idea of no exercise, no diet, no effort. Presumably, there's the effort required to send your payment, but after that, no effort, right? The pseudoscientific critter here is using a specific kind of faulty logic. It's suggesting to you that, look, I get it. Not everybody likes diet and exercise, right? Some people find those undesirable, unwanted characteristics of effective weight loss programs. So they use this sort of non sequitur. If intervention X has undesirable characteristics and intervention Y doesn't have those characteristics, then I guess it follows that intervention Y is better than intervention X, right? No, not necessarily at all. Sometimes this is like taking the bad-tasting cough syrup out of your children's cough medicine only to be left with the sugary flavoring solution at the end and no medicinal benefit. Be wary when claims of effectiveness seem to be based primarily on some issue with another option, particularly when that other option might be, say, as reasonable as exerting some effort to achieve a goal. Now let's take a look at what Dr. Oz actually says, and prepare yourself for a spot-on Dr. Oz impersonation. You may think you may think magic is make-believe. I do. But this little bean has scientists saying they've found the magic weight loss cure for every body type. Clearly, there's still some magical thinking happening here, but I want to talk about what scientists are purportedly saying, right? I mean, evidence-based practice has its scientists who are doing reputable, rigorous research. They have experts. Well, that hardly seems fair. Our pseudoscientific critter needs experts too, right? The problem is, referencing an unknown number of unnamed scientists who may or may not have conducted research on this product in an unknown way is not evidence of anything except that someone is trying to deceive you using the mask of science without any of the rigor. I know a lot of scientists. I see a few of you in this room, and I've never heard one of them suggest magic as a mechanism of action for anything. But wait, you want a scientist? What about the wizard himself, right? What about Dr. Oz? He's a cardiologist, a researcher, a TV celebrity. Certainly he has the credentials, right? What the pseudoscientific critter is doing here is saying, look, this is a really smart guy. Are you as smart as Dr. Oz? No? Well, then perhaps you ought to leave the critical thinking to him, right? No. Regardless of how you may feel about Dr. Oz, there's a bigger issue here, a clear and obvious conflict of interest. If the scientist making the claim is also the person making the profit, there's reason to be skeptical. Now, sometimes I show this to people and what they say is, yeah, I get it, that's a tacky ad. But, a lot of people use this stuff and still do, and how can they all be wrong? Easy. Science doesn't care how many people believe it. Take the Whole Earth Society. Please. There we go. I have to admit, when I first heard about the Flat Earth Society. When I first heard about the Flat Earth Society, I thought it had to be like a spin-off satire from an Onion article or something. I did not think the Flat Earthers were on the level. But, truth is, they have a large and growing membership. Online, it was described, a flat earther posted, we have members around the globe. My point here is simple, though. Do not be fooled by people who would say to you that the number of people who believe something is evidence of anything, no matter how many people say that. What does this have to do with autism? Look, there's remarkable scientific consensus. Vaccines do not cause autism. Thanks. But if you go to the anti-vaccine websites and peruse there for a bit, you see this argument over and over and over again. How can we all be wrong? Easy. You formed a group around an idea that was wrong. But as in most cases of pseudoscience, it's not harmless. These data show the increasing rate of non-medical vaccine exemptions in Texas public school children. There's also an increasing rate of vaccine-preventable disease and vaccine-preventable death. Now, I wish that vaccines had been found to be the cure or the cause of autism. I do. I really genuinely do, because then we could have used the scientific method to find innovative solutions and directly address the problem. But science does not care how much we wish something was true. Look, I've shown several examples from the field of autism and some more examples that are just out of that field that are clearly and obviously ridiculous. But what I'm hoping you're doing is asking yourself, what other more subtle scientific critters might be hiding in my own environment, and what damage are they causing? I want to conclude by shuffling together a few quotes that I think are summative. It does not matter how beautiful your guess is, or how many people believe it, or how smart those believers are. It does not matter how much we wish something was true. All that counts is what is supported by evidence, rigorously and skeptically examined. Because that which is asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. Thank you.